I'm 64 years old, and I've learned something the hard way: life doesn't warn you before it changes. It just kicks the door in and dares you to stand up straight. That night started quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your bones feel cold even before the weather does. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in what used to be my room, folding my sweaters slow, the way you do when you're trying not to panic. Outside, the wind was howling like it had a personal grudge. Snow was slamming into the window sideways, thick and mean. I knew something was wrong the moment my daughter-in-law, Lila, didn't knock. She never knocked. She just pushed the door open like she owned the air in the room. "We need to talk," she said, arms crossed, jaw tight. Behind her stood my son, Ethan. My boy. The one I raised alone. The one I worked 2 jobs for. He wouldn't look at me. That's when my stomach dropped. "Talk about what?" I asked, already knowing I wasn't gonna like the answer. Lila glanced around the room like it offended her. Like my old dresser, my faded quilts, my family photos were clutter she'd been tolerating out of politeness. "This isn't working anymore," she said. "We need the space." I blinked. "The space for what?" "For my classes," she snapped. "Yoga clients don't feel comfortable with all this." "All this?" She meant me. I looked at Ethan. What is she talking about? He shifted his weight. Scratched the back of his neck. Same nervous habit he had as a kid, when he knew he'd messed up. "Mom. Lila's business is growing," he said quietly. "She needs the room." I laughed once. A sharp, disbelieving sound. "So where am I supposed to go?" Lila didn't hesitate. Not even half a second. "There's a shelter downtown," she said. "I heard it's decent." I swear to God, the room spun. "A shelter?" I repeated. "It's a blizzard outside." She shrugged. "People survive worse." That's when I realized something important. This wasn't stress talking. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who she really was. I turned to Ethan again. "You're really okay with this?" He swallowed. Still didn't meet my eyes. "Just for a little while," he said. "Until things settle." Things? Always things. I stood up slow because my knees suddenly didn't trust me. "I raised you," I said, my voice shaking despite my best effort. "I slept on couches so you could have a bed. I skipped meals so you could eat. And you're gonna let your wife throw me out into a storm?" Silence. That was his answer. Lila walked past me and grabbed a suitcase from the closet. She shoved it into my hands like she was handing off trash. "Please don't make this dramatic," she said. "We're stressed enough." Dramatic. I wanted to scream. Instead, I zipped the suitcase with fingers that barely worked and pulled on my coat. The same coat I'd had for 10 years. The one with the busted zipper. When the door slammed behind me, the cold hit like a slap. Snow soaked my shoes in seconds. The wind cut through my coat like it was paper. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, half expecting it to open. It didn't. I walked. Every step felt heavier than the last. My cheeks burned. My eyes watered so bad I could barely see. I kept thinking, this can't be happening. This can't be real. But it was. I ended up sitting in a diner booth at 3 in the morning, wrapped around a cup of coffee I couldn't taste, watching snow pile up outside like the world was burying me on purpose. That was the loneliest night of my life. 3 days later, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Carter?" a man asked. "Yes. My name is Robert Hale. I'm calling about your uncle's estate." "My uncle?" I frowned. "I don't have." "Harold Carter," he said. "Your mother's older brother." My heart skipped. Uncle Harold. The quiet one. The one who sent Christmas cards and nothing else. "I'm afraid he passed away," Robert continued. "And he named you as his sole beneficiary." I remember sitting down real slow. How much? I asked, not even meaning to. There was a pause. $50 million, he said. I laughed. Out loud. A wild, broken sound that scared the lady in the booth next to me. I signed the papers 2 days later. And that's when something inside me changed. Not into anger. Not into revenge. Into clarity. I didn't rush back. I didn't call Ethan. I checked into a hotel downtown. A nice one. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Clean sheets. Hot showers whenever I wanted. And I started paying attention. I learned things. I learned that Lila's yoga business wasn't doing nearly as well as she pretended. I learned their rent was late. I learned Ethan had been laid off months ago and never told me. I learned that the people who called me inconvenient were living on a lie held together with duct tape and ego. And I learned something else too. Sometimes, the universe doesn't punish people right away. Sometimes it waits. Until they think they've won. That's when the real lesson begins. People think power shows up loud. It doesn't. Real power moves quiet, slow, and patient, especially when it's worn by an old woman everyone already counted out. After that phone call about the inheritance, I didn't rush to celebrate. I didn't cry happy tears. I didn't even smile right away. I just sat there in that diner booth long after the waitress stopped refilling my cup, staring at my shaking hands, trying to understand how a life could flip that fast. One night I'm freezing on the street because my daughter-in-law wants a yoga room. 3 days later, I'm worth more money than anyone in that apartment building combined. That kind of whiplash messes with your head. So I slowed everything down on purpose. I checked into a hotel, not flashy, but clean, quiet, and safe. A place where nobody knew me as the mom who lives on the couch. I slept for almost 12 hours straight the first night. No alarms. No guilt. No one banging on the door asking where something was. And when I woke up, something inside me felt still. That's when I knew I had to be smart. Not emotional. Smart. I hired a lawyer the next day. His name was Martin Cole, silver hair, steady voice, eyes that missed nothing. He listened while I told him everything. The marriage. The humiliation. The storm. The suitcase. When I finished, he leaned back and said one sentence that changed how I saw everything. Mrs. Carter, your son and his wife didn't just mistreat you. They assumed you were powerless. That word stuck again. Powerless. He warned me not to say a word about the inheritance. Not to anyone. Especially not family. Once they smell money, he said, every emotion becomes performance. I believed him immediately. So I stayed quiet. Days turned into weeks. I learned how to move through the city without feeling lost. I learned how it felt to sit in a cafe without rushing, how it felt to buy clothes without checking price tags, how it felt to exist without apologizing. And while I was rebuilding myself, I was also watching. Because silence gives you vision. I found out things I was never supposed to know. Ethan hadn't told me he'd lost his job months ago. He was doing odd work, borrowing money, lying through his teeth to keep Lila calm. Their rent was behind. Utilities overdue. Credit cards maxed out. Lila's yoga business. Mostly Instagram and excuses. Real clients were rare. Cash flow even rarer. They weren't thriving. They were drowning, and they'd pushed me under to keep their heads above water. One afternoon, I went back to the apartment while they were out. Just to get the last of my things. I moved slow, careful not to make noise. That's when I heard Ethan on the phone in the kitchen. I just need a little more time, he said, voice cracked. I swear I'm trying. That sound, fear, cut deeper than the storm ever did. Because that fear used to be mine. I didn't confront him. I didn't step out. I packed my photos, my mother's ring, my old recipe box, and I left. That night, Martin called again. The owner of your old building is looking to sell, he said. They are desperate. I laughed softly. Of course they are. He told me the price. Old me would have fainted. New me just nodded. I want it, I said. Cash? There was a pause on the line. Are you absolutely sure? He asked. I thought about Lila standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. About Ethan staring at the floor. About snow soaking through my socks. I've never been more sure, I said. The deal closed faster than I expected. When money is quiet and ready, doors open fast. Papers were signed. Transfers made. Ownership changed. Just like that. I owned the building I'd been thrown out of. But I didn't march in. I didn't announce myself. I didn't even tell the tenants yet. Power doesn't rush. I let management send out notices instead. New ownership. New policies. Inspections. Rent enforcement. That's when panic started creeping into their apartment. I heard it through neighbors. Through complaints. Through whispers. Lila was furious. Whoever bought this place is an idiot, she snapped one night. They are tightening everything. Ethan tried to calm her. Maybe it's temporary. She laughed. Nothing is temporary when poor people are involved. That sentence sealed something in me. A week later, Ethan called. His voice was small. Careful. Mom, hey. I was just thinking about you. I waited. Let the silence stretch. We are having some trouble, he finally said. Just a little. Could you help us out? Just for now. How much? I asked. 15,000. I looked at the city lights outside my window. The same city that watched me shiver weeks ago. Why would I do that? I asked gently. You said I was in the way. Silence. Lila whispered in the background. Coaching. Pushing. We are family, Ethan said finally. Family. I closed my eyes. I'll think about it, I said. After the call ended, I didn't feel angry. I felt steady. Because the truth was this. They were already trapped. They just didn't know who built the cage. And when they found out, nothing would ever be the same. Funny thing about pressure, it don't hit all at once. It shows up in layers. Quiet ones. The kind you don't notice until you can't breathe no more. After Ethan asked me for that 15,000, I didn't answer his calls for 3 days. Not to punish him. Not to play games. I needed to see what he'd do without me rushing in like I always had. Because my whole life, I'd been the net. The soft landing. That it's okay, Mama will figure it out. And I wanted to see who he was without that. Turns out, not ready. On the 4th day, I finally picked up. He sounded worse. Thinner somehow. Like stress had eaten pieces of him. They put a notice on the door, he said. Some kind of lease violation thing. I already knew. The new management, my management, had flagged unpaid utilities, unauthorized business use of the unit, and noise complaints from Lila's so-called classes. All legal. All clean. I told you this place was bad news, Lila's voice snapped in the background. They are trying to squeeze us out. I stayed quiet, listening. She says if we don't come up with the money, we could get evicted, Ethan said. Evicted. That word carries weight when you've lived it. I'm sorry, I said softly. That's scary. You could help, Lila cut in, loud enough for me to hear. You have savings. You always said you did. I almost laughed. Savings. I pictured her telling me to go sleep in a shelter because she needed space to breathe. You didn't need my savings then, I said calmly. Why now? There it was. Silence so thick I could hear Ethan swallow. Mom, he said finally. That was a bad night. A bad night. Like blizzards just happen out of nowhere, and old women bounce back easy. I'll call you later, I said, and hung up before he could beg. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt, from clarity. I realized something sitting there in that hotel room, staring at the ceiling. They didn't miss me. They missed what I provided. And that hurt worse than the cold ever did. The next morning, I met with Martin again. He laid everything out clean and slow, like explaining chess to someone who'd only ever played checkers. If they fall behind again, he said, eviction proceedings can start within weeks. I nodded. And if they find out you're the owner, he asked. They won't, I said. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not until they'd felt it. I wanted them to understand what it meant to lose control. To wake up every day not knowing if today was the day the door got knocked on. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I drove past the building. Didn't go in. Just parked across the street and watched. Lila stormed out first, phone pressed to her ear, pacing like the world owed her something. Ethan followed a few minutes later, shoulders slumped, rubbing his face the way he used to as a kid when he was overwhelmed. They looked smaller. Not weaker, just exposed. I didn't feel joy. I felt something heavier. Truth. A week later, the second notice went up. Rent adjustment. Market rate. That's when the real panic kicked in. Ethan showed up at my hotel unannounced. Front desk called first. There's a man here asking for you. Says he's your son. I told them to send him up. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. His jacket was too thin for the weather. His eyes were red, not from crying, from not sleeping. He didn't sit right away. Just stood there like a kid waiting to be scolded. I didn't know where else to go, he said. I poured him coffee. Didn't rush. Didn't hug him either. What happened? I asked. They raised the rent, he said. Again. And the utilities company shut off the warning. Lila's freaking out. I nodded. Sounds hard. She says we should move, he went on. But we don't have the deposit. Or first month. Or anywhere to go. There it was. Rock bottom tapping on the door. And you? I asked. What do you want? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I don't know, he said finally. I didn't think life would get like this. I leaned back and looked at him. Really looked. Ethan, I said, when you watched your wife throw me out into that storm, what did you think was gonna happen to me? His eyes filled instantly. I thought you'd figure it out, he whispered. I nodded slowly. So did you. He broke then. Fully. Covered his face. Shoulders shaking. I messed up, he said. I should have stopped her. Yes, I said. You should have. No yelling. No cruelty. Just truth. When he left that evening, I didn't offer money. Didn't offer solutions. I offered one thing only. You can come see me, I said. You can talk. But I won't fix this for you. That night, Lila posted online. Long rant. Cryptic. Angry. Funny how people pretend to be family until you actually need help. I smiled sadly when I read it. She still didn't get it. 2 days later, management scheduled inspections. Legal. Standard. Lila lost it. She called me screaming. This is all your fault, she yelled. Ever since you left, everything went wrong. I stayed calm. You told me to leave, I said. Remember? You're punishing us. No, I said quietly. Life is. She hung up. And for the first time since the blizzard, I slept like a baby. Because the walls weren't closing in because of revenge. They were closing in because of consequences. And the day they finally found out who was holding the keys. That was coming real soon. I didn't hear from them for almost 2 weeks after that. And for the first time in my life, that silence didn't scare me. It used to. Silence used to mean something was wrong, that I'd failed as a mother, that my boy was hurting and I wasn't there fast enough. I spent decades running toward noise, cries, complaints, emergencies, like it was my job to fix every crack in his life before it split wide open. But this silence felt different. It felt earned. Every morning, I woke up in that quiet hotel room, sunlight creeping in through those tall windows, and I realized something strange. My chest didn't feel tight. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't bracing myself for the next phone call demanding something from me. I had space. Real space. Not the kind Lila used to talk about while pushing me out into a blizzard. The kind that lets you breathe and think and remember who you were before you became someone's safety net. Martin called midweek. They missed another payment, he said. Utilities too. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't care. Because I cared enough to listen carefully to what that information meant. And I finally asked. An eviction proceedings will start officially. Notices go out next week. I thanked him and hung up. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at my hands. These same hands that had packed lunches, scrubbed floors, worked overtime shifts, held my son when his father walked out and never looked back. I wondered when those hands had stopped being allowed to rest. The next call came from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Mom? Ethan's voice came through, rough and quiet. Hey, I said. We got the papers, he said. The real ones. I closed my eyes. What are you gonna do? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know, he admitted. Lila's blaming everyone. The landlord. The city. You? I didn't react. And you? I asked again. I'm tired, he said. I'm tired of pretending we are victims when we are not. That was new. He came by 2 days later. Alone. No yelling. No demands. No speeches about families sticking together. Just him. He looked older. Not in years. In understanding. We sat across from each other in the hotel lobby. He kept his hands folded tight, like if he let go they might shake. She wants me to fight it, he said. Get a lawyer. Start a GoFundMe. Say the landlord's corrupt. And what do you want? I asked. I want this to stop, he said quietly. All of it. I nodded. She keeps saying if you'd just help, everything would go back to normal, he added. I looked at him then. Really looked. And would it? I asked. He swallowed hard. No. That answer told me more than any apology ever could. A week later, the eviction notice was posted. Lila lost it completely. She showed up at my hotel, unannounced, unhinged, eyes wild like she hadn't slept in days. You did this, she screamed right there in the lobby, drawing stares. You planned all of it. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't flinch. Lower your voice, I said. Or you'll be escorted out. That shocked her more than yelling ever would've. You think you're better than me now, she spat. Living like this while we are drowning. You pushed me into a storm, I said evenly. And went to bed warm. This is not about better. This is about consequences. Ethan stepped between us. Stop, he said to her. Just stop. She turned on him then. Accused him of choosing me. Of abandoning her. Of being weak. And that's when I saw it. The moment. The exact second my son finally understood what I'd been carrying alone all those years. He looked at her and said something that changed everything. You treated my mother like she didn't matter. The lobby went dead quiet. She laughed bitterly. Oh please. She's fine. No, he said. She wasn't. And I let it happen. She stormed out after that. Didn't look back. 2 days later, Ethan called me. "We're separating," he said. No drama. No anger. Just truth. I didn't celebrate. I didn't mourn either. I just listened. "I need to figure out who I am," he said. Without hiding behind her. Without hiding behind you. That was the moment I knew something real had shifted. The eviction went through quietly. No spectacle. No last-minute rescue. They moved into separate places. Smaller. Cheaper. Real. I watched from a distance. Not out of spite. Out of respect for the lesson. Months passed. I moved out of the hotel. Bought myself a small place near the water. Not a mansion. Not a statement. A home. Ethan started calling once a week. Never asking for money. Never complaining. Just talking. About work. About therapy. About the things he was finally seeing clearly. Lila disappeared from my life completely. And honestly, that peace was priceless. One evening, sitting on my balcony, watching the sun dip low, I realized something that hit me harder than the blizzard ever did. Losing them wasn't what broke me. Finding myself again was what saved me. And the truth they still didn't fully know. Who really owned the keys? That truth hadn't been spoken yet. And when it finally was, it was gonna change how they remembered everything. People think once the storm passes, everything goes quiet. That healing comes wrapped up neat, like a bow on a gift. That ain't how real life works. Not at my age. Not after you've been burned by the same people you'd have stepped in front of traffic for. The calm that came after Ethan and Lila split wasn't peaceful at first. It was unfamiliar. And unfamiliar can feel just as scary as chaos when you've lived your whole life reacting instead of choosing. I moved into my place by the water in early spring. Nothing flashy. 2 bedrooms, wide windows, a porch that caught the sunset just right. The kind of place you buy when you're done proving things. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout straight from the carton, no TV on, just the sound of waves in the distance. And I cried. Not because I was sad. Because for the first time in decades, nobody needed anything from me. That silence. It was loud. Ethan called every Sunday like clockwork. Never missed one. Never rushed off the phone either. At first, our conversations stayed light. Safe. Weather. Work. His new apartment above a bakery that smelled like burnt sugar and regret. Then one night, he said something that made me grip the arm of my chair. "I didn't know how angry I was," he said. "At myself. At you. At the world." I waited. Didn't interrupt. "I used to think being a good son meant avoiding conflict," he went on. "Keeping everyone happy. Turns out that just made me weak." That word again. Weak. I'd hated hearing it when Lila threw it around like a weapon. But coming from him, it sounded different. Honest. "You weren't weak," I said. "You were scared." He sighed. "Yeah. I was." A month later, Martin called. "I wanted to give you a heads up," he said. "Property management completed the transfer. Riverside Lofts officially changed hands today." I thanked him and hung up. That chapter was closed. Or so I thought. 2 weeks after that, I ran into Lila. Not planned. Not dramatic. Just fate being messy like it always is. I was at a grocery store near my place, standing in line with a cart full of stuff I'd never bothered buying before. Fresh herbs. Fancy cheese. Real coffee, not the cheap kind I'd been stretching for years. She was 2 registers over. At first, I didn't recognize her. No makeup. Hair pulled back tight. Clothes plain and worn. She looked tired. She saw me at the same time I saw her. Her eyes widened. Then hardened. I expected anger. Screaming. accusations. Instead, she just stared. Long, heavy. Like she was looking at a ghost. I paid and walked past her without stopping. But my heart was pounding like I'd just run uphill. That night, Ethan called. She saw you today, he said quietly. I know, I replied. She asked if you'd planned everything, he continued. If you'd been waiting to ruin her. And what did you say? I asked. I told her the truth, he said. That you waited for us to learn. And we didn't listen until it hurt. Silence stretched between us. She wants to talk to you, he added. I closed my eyes. Not yet, I said. I wasn't ready. Because forgiveness ain't about rushing to make other people feel better. It's about being honest with yourself. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Careful. Nervous. From Lila. No excuses. No blaming. Just words that felt scraped raw. She wrote about losing control. About how success had always felt like something she had to perform instead of earn. About how she'd mistaken dominance for strength. She apologized. Not for kicking me out. For believing I deserved it. That distinction mattered. I didn't reply right away. Time passed. Summer rolled in soft and slow. I started painting again. Little landscapes. Messy skies. Nothing special, but they made my hands feel useful without being used. Ethan came by one afternoon to help fix a loose railing on my porch. We worked in silence for a bit. Then he said, I remember that night. My chest tightened. The blizzard, he clarified. The look on your face when she handed you the suitcase. I didn't speak. I thought you were strong enough to handle it, he said. That you'd land on your feet. I set my brush down. I shouldn't have had to, I said. He nodded. Hard. You shouldn't have. That was the moment I knew something real had changed. Not just guilt. Growth? That evening, as he was leaving, he turned back and asked, Can I ask you something? Always, I said. Why didn't you tell us, he asked. About the inheritance. About owning the building. Why hide it? I smiled sadly. Because if I told you sooner, I said, you would have apologized to save yourselves. Not because you understood. He swallowed. And now, he asked. Now, I said, you're finally seeing me. Not what I can provide. Just me. He hugged me then. Tight. Careful. Like he finally understood how fragile that bond had been. Later that night, sitting alone, I thought about the truth I'd been holding back. The full truth. Not just the money. The decisions. The control. The keys. And I realized something important. Secrets don't protect you forever. They just delay the moment of reckoning. And that moment. It was closer than Ethan realized. Because the truth about who'd been pulling the strings. Who'd decided when the lesson would end. That truth was about to step out of the shadows. And when it did, it wasn't gonna feel like revenge. It was gonna feel like judgment. By the time fall rolled in, the truth had started pressing on me like a weight I couldn't ignore no more. Not because I felt guilty. Because I was tired of carrying it alone. See, people think holding power feels loud. Flashy. Like you're walking around knowing something everyone else doesn't. But real power. It's quiet. Heavy. It sits on your chest at night and asks you hard questions when nobody's watching. Questions like, when does a lesson become punishment? And who decides when enough is enough? Ethan was changing. I could see it plain as day. He'd lost weight, yeah, but not in that hollow, scared way from before. This was different. He stood straighter. Looked people in the eye. Took responsibility without being pushed. He started picking me up for lunch once a week. Nothing fancy. Diners. Sandwich spots. Places where regular folks went. Places I used to love before life got complicated. One afternoon, while we were waiting on coffee, he said something that made my stomach tighten. I ran into Martin Webb. I kept my face calm. Took a sip. Yeah? I said. At a networking thing for work, he went on. We talked for a minute. And? I asked. He looked at me funny, Ethan said. Like he knew me. I didn't answer right away. He asked how my mom was doing, Ethan added. Said it real deliberate. There it was. The first crack. I smiled softly. Probably just polite. Ethan didn't look convinced. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the length of my house barefoot, listening to the quiet, thinking about all the chess moves I'd made these past months. Clean ones. Legal ones. But still, calculated. I hadn't lied outright. But I sure as hell hadn't told the whole truth either. A week later, Lila reached out again. Not through Ethan this time. Direct. She asked if we could talk. I don't want money, she wrote. I don't want anything. I just need to say some things out loud. I stared at the message for a long time before answering. Finally, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our places. Neutral ground. She arrived early. Nervous. Twisting her cup like it might run away. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not defeated, just humbled. I know you don't owe me anything, she started. But I need you to know. I see it now. I stayed quiet. I thought power meant control, she said. I thought if I kept things perfect, I wouldn't lose them. And when you didn't fit that picture, I panicked. I nodded once. I hurt you because it was easier than admitting I was scared, she said, voice cracking. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to carry this without saying it. That mattered. I thanked her for the honesty. Nothing more. Nothing less. When I got home, Ethan had left a voicemail. Mom, he said. I found something weird. My heart skipped. What? I muttered to the empty room. I was looking up the old building online, he continued. The Riverside one. Outer curiosity. Ownership records changed again. I sat down slowly. And? I whispered. It traces back to a management firm, he said. Same one tied to Marcus Webb. There it was. The truth knocking louder now. He didn't accuse me. Didn't jump to conclusions. But I could hear it in his voice. The pieces were lining up. That night, I made a decision. Not out of fear. Out of respect, for myself and for the man my son was finally becoming. I invited Ethan over for dinner. Cooked real food. Set the table. No distractions. He knew something was coming. I could see it in how careful he was being. After dessert, I poured us both tea and sat across from him. There's something you need to know, I said. He nodded. I figured. I took a breath. The building, I said slowly. The eviction. The management company. He leaned forward. I owned it, I said. From the start. Silence slammed down between us. His face didn't change right away. No anger. No shock. Just stillness. You, he finally said. Yes. How, he asked quietly. I told him everything. The inheritance. The shell company. Marcus. The choices I made and why I made them. I didn't justify. I explained. When I finished, his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. So you let us fall, he said. I let you face consequences, I corrected gently. The same way I faced mine when your father left. When nobody saved me. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. I don't know how to feel, he admitted. That's okay, I said. You don't have to decide tonight. He stood up and walked to the window. Stared out for a long time. Finally, he turned back to me. You could have told me sooner, he said. Yes, I agreed. You could have rescued us, he added. Yes. Why didn't you, he asked. I met his eyes. Because if I did, I said softly, you'd still be the same man, who watched his mother walk into a storm and told himself she'd be fine. That hit. He nodded slowly. I needed to learn, he said. Yes, I replied. And so did I. He hugged me before he left. Long reel. Not out of guilt. Out of understanding. After the door closed, I sat alone in the quiet and felt something settle in my chest. Relief. Because the truth was finally out. But what I didn't know yet was how that truth was gonna ripple outward. Because Ethan wasn't the only one who was about to learn who'd really been holding the keys this whole time. And when that realization reached the last person it needed to, it was gonna change the everything. By the time word started spreading, I already knew it was too late to put the truth back in the box. Truth don't stay quiet once it gets air. It stretches. It travels. It knocks on doors you never planned to open. Ethan tried to keep it private. I'll give him that. But shame has a funny way of leaking through the cracks, and pride don't ever go down without a fight. Lila found out 3 days after Ethan did. Not from him. From her mouth running where it shouldn't have. She'd been venting at work, same coffee shop she was bussing tables at, complaining about rich landlords, and crooked systems, and family that pretends to be poor then stabs you in the back. One of the regulars, a woman who knew Marcus Webb through some charity board, put 2 and 2 together real quick. And suddenly, Lila knew. She showed up at my house unannounced. No call. No warning. Just pure audacity wrapped in old anger. I saw her through the front window first. Standing stiff on my porch like she owned the place. Like she still had the right. I didn't rush. I finished my tea. Let the kettle cool. Let her stand there with her thoughts. When I opened the door, her mouth was already moving. You planned it, she snapped. You planned everything. I stepped aside. You gonna yell out here, or you coming in like a grown woman? She hesitated. Then walked in. She didn't sit. Didn't take her coat off. Just stood there in my living room like the floor might bite her. You bought the building, she said. You watched us drown. I folded my hands. Calm. I watched you make choices, I corrected. Her laugh was sharp. Ugly. You ruined us, she said. You took everything. I tilted my head. No, I said slowly. I stopped giving. That hit her harder than any yelling would have. She paced. Ran her hands through her hair. Then turned on me with tears burning in her eyes. You could have helped, she said. You had the money. You had the power. And you had my safety in your hands that night, I said evenly. Remember? She froze. I was cold, I continued. Scared. 64 years old, holding a bag with my life in it. And you told me a shelter was good enough. Her voice dropped. We were under pressure. So was I said. Silence filled the room. Thick. Uncomfortable. Then she said the one thing she thought might save her. You did this to teach us a lesson. Yes, I said. And she pushed. Was it worth it? I stood up. Walked over to the window. Looked out at a life I built after years of being overlooked. Then I turned back. Ask yourself something, I said. If I hadn't done a thing, if I'd just vanished into that storm, would you even be asking that question? Her lips parted. No answer came. That's when Ethan showed up. He hadn't planned to. I could tell by the way he stopped short when he saw her. Mom, he said quietly. Lila spun on him. You knew. He nodded. Yeah. And you didn't tell me. I needed to understand it myself first, he said. And so do you. She laughed again, but this time it cracked. "So what now?" she asked. "You just get to sit on your throne and decide who suffers." I walked back to my chair. "No," I said. "Life does that." I just stopped interrupting it. That's when she lost it. Accusations. Tears. Blame flying everywhere. She called me heartless. Manipulative. Cold. Said I enjoyed watching them fall. Ethan finally raised his voice. "Stop," he said. "Just stop." She stared at him like she didn't recognize him. "She didn't do this," he said. "We did." "You did." "I did." Her shoulders sagged. "You let her evict us," she whispered. "I let myself face the truth," he replied. "For once." That broke her. She sank onto the couch, sobbing like someone who'd finally run out of lies to hide behind. "I didn't think it would end like this," she cried. I softened then. "Just a little." "Neither did I said. "But endings ain't about what we expect. They are about what we earn." When she left, it wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors. No threats. Just quiet footsteps and a woman who finally understood she wasn't the victim she'd convinced herself she was. After that, the fallout came fast. Family members started calling. Old friends. Folks who'd heard pieces of the story twisted sideways. Some praised me. Called it genius. Others said I went too far. I didn't explain myself to none of them. Because the people who mattered already knew the truth. Ethan kept rebuilding. Slow. Honest. One brick at a time. Lila moved back with her parents and disappeared from my orbit completely. And me? I thought it was over. Thought the lesson had landed. Thought the chapter was closing. But I was wrong. Because one afternoon, a letter showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name. Written neat. Deliberate. Inside was a single sentence. "You think you won. But some debts don't stay buried." My chest tightened. Because I knew, right then and there. This story wasn't done with me yet. And whoever sent that letter. They knew more than they should have. That letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. I didn't touch it. Didn't throw it away. Didn't show it to Ethan either. Because some things, you gotta sit with before you decide how much power they really got. You think you won. But some debts don't stay buried. At first, I thought it was Lila. Hurt pride can turn nasty real quick. And she'd lost more than money, she'd lost control. People like that don't let go easy. But the handwriting. Too clean. Too calm. No shake in it. That wasn't rage. That was confidence. And that's what bothered me. A week later, I found out who sent it. Life got real loud after that. It was Marcus who called. Early. Too early. "Where are you?" he asked, voice tight. "At home," I said. "Why?" "Good," he replied. "Don't go anywhere." That's when I knew this wasn't family drama no more. This was business. And business don't care about feelings. Turns out, when money moves fast and quiet, it wakes up old ghosts. My Uncle Harold's estate. It wasn't as forgotten as we thought. There was a distant cousin. A bitter one. Someone who'd expected a slice of that 50 million and didn't get a dime. He'd been digging. Not because of Ethan. Not because of Lila. Because of me. Because I was the one who didn't deserve it. Funny how people always think they're entitled to what you survived to earn. Marcus laid it out straight. He's contesting the will, he said. Claiming undue influence. Mental incompetence. The usual. I laughed. Short. Sharp. That man barely knew Harold. Doesn't matter, Marcus said. He's got money and time. And he's mad. That's when the letter made sense. This wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Ethan took it harder than I expected. When I finally told him, his face went pale in that same old way, like when he was a kid and realized he'd broken something he couldn't fix. "This is my fault," he said immediately. I shook my head. "No, baby. This started way before you." But he didn't buy it. "If I hadn't messed up, if you hadn't bought that building." "Stop," I said firmly. "Don't rewrite history just to punish yourself." He sat down, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. "I don't want you fighting alone," he said. And that's when I saw it. Not guilt. Not fear. Growth? "You're not," I told him. "But this is my fight." He nodded slowly. "I'll still stand with you." That meant more to me than any check ever could. The legal mess dragged on for months. Depositions. Paperwork. People questioning my motives like they knew my life better than I did. I stayed calm. Because when you've been through real storms, courtroom rain don't scare you. The cousin, let's call him Raymond, finally showed his face. Smug. Well-dressed. The type who never missed a meal, but always felt robbed. "You manipulated an old man," he said during mediation. "You took advantage." I looked him dead in the eye. "No," I said. "I showed up when nobody else did." Silence. Truth tends to do that. Here's the thing folks don't talk about. Money reveals character. But pressure. Pressure exposes it. Raymond folded when the evidence came out. Letters from Harold. Videos. Handwritten notes talking about my sacrifices. My years of struggle. My loyalty when others vanished. The case collapsed. Quietly. Just like his courage. After it was over, I sat alone on my porch one evening, watching the lake go still as glass. Charlie, the dog, rested his head on my knee. Peace finally felt real. Not loud. Not flashy. Earned. Ethan came by later with coffee and that half smile he gets when he's thinking too much. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah. I am." He hesitated. Then said, "I'm proud of you." I laughed. "Took you long enough." We both smiled. No past arguments. No debts hanging in the air. Just two people who finally learned how to stand without stepping on someone else. Here's what I learned through all of it. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is stop being small for people who benefit from you staying that way. Sometimes, love means letting folks fall, so they can learn how to stand. And sometimes, the door that gets slammed in your face. It's the same door you'll open later, stronger, wiser, and unafraid. I didn't win because I had money. I won because I finally chose myself. And now I want to hear from you. White right pointing backhand index. Have you ever been pushed aside by family when you were at your weakest? White right pointing backhand index. Would you have done what I did, or forgiven sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story hit you in the chest the way it hit me living it, subscribe, because these stories, they ain't just drama. They are lessons. And trust me, the next one might sound real familiar.